المهم بعنوان تدريس فلسطين الممارسة التربوية وشمولة العدالة. بروفيسور ماهر النجح، بروفيسور رباب Abdulhadi, Dr. Saida Afuna, our dear colleagues, our dear students, welcome today in this very important conference entitled Teaching Palestine, Pedagogical, Praxis, and the Indivisibility of Justice. سنبدأ هذا المؤتمر بالوقوف دقيقة صمت وإجلال مع قراءة الفاتحة لأرواح شهدائنا وشهداء العدالة والنضال ضد الظلم حول العالم. We begin this conference with standing a moment of silence in respect of our Palestinian martyrs and all martyrs around the world who fought injustice and oppression. Shukran jazeelan. Thank you. We begin this conference with welcoming remarks from our acting president, Professor Maher An-Najah. Please, تفضل دكتور ماهر بالترحيب بالضيوف.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أول شيء أهلا وسهلا بكم جميعا. نحن سعيدين جدا بوجود ضيوفنا، واسمحوا لي معلش إني أتكلم باللغة الإنجليزية طبعا من أجل الضيوف. دكتور رباب Abdulhadi, our distinguished guests and friends, colleagues from An-Najah National University. Welcome all. We at An-Najah National University are delighted to have you and your colleagues here to participate and share in this conference. I am delighted to hear the amazing and diverse research by both international and Palestinian academics on this crucial subject of teaching justice-centered knowledge production on Palestine. As you all know, the future of the Palestinian cause is unclear after Trump's latest decision. But of course, it has turned again the attention of the world to Jerusalem. People around the world are dedicated themselves to solidarity campaigns that promote the human rights of the Palestinian people and their undeniable right to live free of occupation. Your presence here today and participation in this event is a crucial part of these global efforts. Today and throughout the history of the occupation, universities across Palestine have faced many barriers that hindered our ability to develop and provide our students with the highest quality education. Currently, our top priority is to build the skills needed for them to successfully compete in the global economy. Among the many restrictions we face, one is the ability to employ international academics or provide strong academic programs to international students because of strict limitation on visas allocated to internationals working or living in Palestine, which is imposed by the Israeli occupation. An-Najah has succeeded in playing a vital role in raising awareness of the Palestinian situation, working steadily through the years to initiate academic collaboration with universities and partners across the world. These programs include joint research, faculty and student exchanges, and many other forms of international partnerships and collaboration. Through dedication to excellence, we have managed to become one of the highest ranking universities within the MENA region, ranking in the top 2% and also quite high in international ranking. We hope that this conference today and your visit will serve to be a starting point for future sustainable collaborations that support our students and further awareness and support of Palestine. Thank you for coming, and I wish you a successful conference and a good stay in Palestine in the coming few days. Lastly, I would like to congratulate Dr. Abdulhadi for defeating lawfare and scoring another victory for academic freedom and the Palestinian cause. الشكر أيضا لزميلتي الدكتورة سائدة على اللي هي ترتيباتها ومتابعتها لهذا المؤتمر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Shukran jaziran, Dr. Maher. Thank you very much, Professor Maher An-Najah. You know that our collaboration with Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi and San Francisco State University, and before that, the Arab American Studies Center in Michigan, started in 2005. يعني بدأ التعاون مع الدكتورة رباب عبد الهادي من سنة 2005. يعني صار عندنا هلا 13 سنة من cooperation, 13 years of cooperation, very fruitful cooperation, culminated in the signing of memorandum of understanding between An-Najah National University and San Francisco State Universities. And due to this concerted efforts on Palestine and fighting for justice, Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi has endured a lot of attacks from the Zionist lobby in the United States. نتيجة هذا النشاط الأكاديمي والتعاون مع جامعة النجاح، تعرض الدكتور رباب عبد الهادي وكل الأصوات المتضامنة مع الشعب الفلسطيني والتي تعمل في الأكاديمية لتطرح قضية فلسطين، تعرضوا لمحاولة إسكات الأصوات من اللوبي الصهيوني. ولكن كما قال البروفيسور ماهر النجاشي، ربحت الدكتورة رباب قضية قام بها اللوبي الصهيوني لإسكات هذا الصوت الحر، ولكن الدكتورة رباب نجحت وفي يعني إنهاء هذه القضية إن شاء الله والفوز عليها، فكل التحية للدكتورة رباب. We will start our plenary keynote session, and with us a distinguished scholar. We will start with Dr. Robin Kelley. He's the Barry B. Nash Endowed Chair in U.S. History, and he is a professor teaching at the UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. His title of the paper would be Freedom Dreams, Emancipatory Pedagogies, Zionism and Palestine. So please help me welcome Dr. Robin Kelley. ساعدوني في الترحيب بالدكتور روبن كالي، وهو بروفيسور في التاريخ، سيتحدث عن Freedom Dreams، أحلام الحرية، بيداغوجيا التحررية والصهيونية وفلسطين. فأهلا وسهلا بك.
شكرا. I just have to be able to see this. Okay, good morning. First I want to thank wow, I didn't realize how many people were here. Amazing. Okay, I have to go very quickly at 15 minutes. So I want to thank the organizers, Dr. Abdulhadi, Dr. Saeed Abu Hajj, and as well as the faculty and staff and students at An-Najah University. So I was planning to give a more theoretical talk about emancipatory pedagogies and decolonization. But then, we had a tour yesterday of the Abu Jihad Museum for the Prisoners Movement, and I saw a poster that caught my eye. And on the poster, one of the slogans was "Free the Land." And for me, I grew up saying "Free the Land," part of the political community I was a part of. That was one of the slogans that we used all the time when we said goodbye, "Free the land." And it was a moment of recognition and memory. So the elaborate title that you just heard read really comes down to a single question, and that is, what does it mean to teach Palestine from a Black studies perspective? Now, Black studies emerged around 1967-68, in the academy at least, initially as a radical project conceived not only outside of the university, but in opposition to what was then a Eurocentric, and still is, Eurocentric university culture with ties to corporate and military power. Now, Palestine was there in Black studies from its inception. And Dr. Rabab could also tell you about how her own department was founded as part of a College of Ethnic Studies, which came into being by a group called the Third World Liberation Front, and there's many examples. So by 1967, Third World and radicalized oppressed minorities in the US came to see the Arab-Israeli war as a war of dispossession. Israel as a colonial state backed by US imperialism, and Palestinians as victims of colonial subjugation. Now, this was a radical break from the past, contrary to the myth that African Americans or Black people and Palestinians were natural allies. Much of the Black world before that actually identified with Zionism through the Old Testament book of Exodus. Marcus Garvey himself identified his movement as Zionist. In the US and in the Caribbean, many leaders, most Black leaders and Black press, embraced the founding of Israel because they recognized European Jews as an oppressed and homeless people determined to build a nation of their own. But it wasn't just Black intellectuals who gave Zionism a pass and ignored the Nakba. The left generally failed to see Israel as a colonial project, specifically a settler colonial state founded on the subjugation of indigenous and imported racialized labor. And part of this has to do with the sort of unique historical context for Israel's founding, as well as the power of its founding myths. So Israel, in the myth, was born as a nation identified as victims of colonial and racist violence, which gains its independence through insurrection against British rule. Now, of course, this narrative erases the violence of ethnic cleansing that was the Nakba. Israel's founding myth convinced even the most anti-colonial Black intellectuals to link Israel's independence with African independence and with Third World liberation. And at some point, even Israel's ruling party pursued alliances with newly independent African nations under the guise that they too were part of the non-aligned movement. And in fact, Israeli leaders were always quick to condemn racism around the globe. Ironically, the first person to describe Israel as an apartheid state, and some of you may know this, was South Africa's Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd, who in 1961 said, Israel's the apartheid state. The Jews took Israel from the Arabs, and after the Arabs had lived there for 1,000 years. So when I came to Black studies during the late 70s and 80s, and I know it was a long time ago, but I'm a very old person, we emphasized the critique of power over identity politics. And the books we read were books by George Jackson. That was part of our curriculum. Back then, on the eve of the first Intifada, we regarded the PLO and the PFLP and other organizations as a vanguard in a global third world struggle for self-determination. Now remember, I shouldn't remember, for all the young people, you won't remember this, but those were revolutionary times. I mean, in the 80s, there were struggles in South Africa, in Namibia, in Grenada, in the Congo, in the Western Sahara, everywhere, elsewhere, all on the horizon. Palestine stood on the front lines in a protracted battle against imperialism and what we then called settler capitalism. Palestinians were not victims in our book. They were armed revolutionary combatants and therefore models for those of us dedicated to Black liberation and socialism. Insurgent social movements, however, met the university during its neoliberal term, when administrators in the US tried to capture ethnic studies and introduce liberal multiculturalism. The rise of a liberal kind of corporate multiculturalist discourse celebrated diversity and difference without ever addressing or seriously addressing racism, patriarchy, and structural inequalities. Ethnic cultures were the product of heritage, according to this discourse, that had to be respected and understood. Therefore, under the hegemony of corporate diversity discourse, ethnic studies programs flourished by the mid-1990s, and at least 700 universities had ethnic studies programs of some sort, mostly black studies. But these were programs that were shorn of a relationship with community, shorn of a relationship to social movements, which is exactly how black studies came into being in the first place. So the political culture also began to change. In South Africa, for example, when the United Democratic Front became the dominant political formation, revolution was pushed aside in favor of negotiation and compromise. And then we get Oslo, and I don't have to tell you that story. Human rights discourse was also ascendant, and intellectuals declared that we are now in a post-colonial moment. Especially with the spectacular violence of Israel's wars on Gaza, the killing of innocents was the focus of Palestine solidarity work. This played into the kind of deserving versus undeserving dead binary, which excluded those defending their territory in accordance with international law from any claims to human rights, foreclosing any serious conversation about the justifiable right to self-defense, let alone the right to wage a struggle against colonial domination. But we know that Western liberals are not pacifists. Sometimes they pretend to be. They're quick to arm rebels so long as they're the right rebels. The innocent child, the grandmother, the widow are the only Palestinians deserving of liberal sympathies, for they are ostensibly unburdened by political motives, even though they dream dreams of taking back the native land, of recovering stolen property, of enjoying the rights of citizenship and nationality and the right to return home, and bringing down Israel's apartheid state once and for all. But what about those dreams? Palestinian dreams, the Black liberation dreams, freedom dreams. How did we move from a solidarity rooted in the commonalities of resistance to one based almost entirely on the commonalities of oppression? How do we move from a vision of liberation, a dream of building a post-Zionist, post-racist world, to a solidarity rooted in shared victimization? How has this limited our political imagination and how we teach Palestine or revolutionary movements more generally? The most recent trend in Black studies emerging out of a kind of neoliberal identity politics is called Afro-pessimism. And Afro-pessimism resurrects old colonial ideas in the guise of Black radicalism. And it's a baffling analytical turn that strips Black people of political agency, denies the saliency of class and class struggle, pits Black struggles against anti-colonial struggles as if they're in opposition, and most of all, forecloses the possibility of cross-racial, ethnic, or national solidarity. And a particular variant of Afro-pessimism views the entire modern world founded on anti-Black solidarity, and Blackness is relegated to a permanent social death predicated on what one scholar calls modalities of accumulation and fungibility. So in this formulation, anti-Blackness replaces racism, which not only severely limits our understanding of structural racism, but forecloses anti-racist solidarity, since all but authentic Black people harbor or reproduce, if not depend on anti-Blackness. Thankfully, it's not a dominant trend, nor is it insignificant. But then again, the kind of Black Palestinian solidarity I've been talking about has never been a mass movement. Even now, with high-profile delegations, growing support for BDS, in groups like Black Lives, the Movement for Black Lives rather, and the extraordinary work of Black for Palestine, who you'll hear from later today, the numbers are still relatively small, and Palestine is still finding its place in Black studies curriculum. So to come to some conclusion, besides combating Afro-pessimism, we need to reconnect Black study to social movements and existing anti-colonial struggles. And I say anti-colonial, I know it's old-fashioned, but I think it really matters. But to do this requires teaching Palestinian movements, not just BDS, but all manifestations of the liberation movement and their ideas, how analysis and critique is produced in struggle. It's not enough to study the daily humiliations of the checkpoints, Israel's apartheid wall, and the fortress-like West Bank settlements, home demolitions, the bombing of Gaza, or count the flow of US dollars funding occupation. A radical Black studies approach demands that we engage different sources, different archives, like the collection of prisoners' writings we encountered yesterday at the Abu Jihad Museum, the works of Palestinian intellectuals, as well as movement documents. This is not a dead history, but a living movement. And I can say from experience, having been already on 2 delegations to Palestine, that what impressed me most were the activists, the intellectuals, the youth, who spoke confidently about a liberated country, who saw the old guard leadership in the Palestinian Authority as impediments, who envisioned and debated a dozen different paths to democratic and a decolonized future. They did not all agree, but they struggled over these questions. And finally, as I learned yesterday, as Dr. Abdulhadi walked us through the cemetery, which was a very powerful moving experience, to come to terms, to understand what a Black studies approach to Palestine means, it means to come to terms of what it means to be a martyr as opposed to a casualty. Thank you.
شكرا كثير دكتور روبن. أنا بعرف إنه مش الجميع لغته الإنجليزية بنفس القوة، ولكن يعني سألخص ب3 جمل. دكتور روبن حكى عن تاريخ دخول القضية الفلسطينية في خلال الدراسات الأفرو أمريكية ودراسات السوداء في أمريكا، كيف انتقلت من التضامن مع الفكر الصهيوني والخطاب الصهيوني والأساطير المؤسسة لإسرائيل، وكيف انتقلت إلى النموذج الليبرالي، ومن ثم كيف هذه الدراسات العرقية انتشرت في الولايات المتحدة، ومن ثم انتقل إلى النموذج الراديكالي في الدراسات الأفرو أمريكية في تعاملها مع التضامن مع الشعب الفلسطيني. وذكر كيف زيارتهم لمتحف أبو جهاد، متحف الأسرى أبو جهاد، وكيف هذه النماذج النضالية الفلسطينية ممكن أن تبني الجسور مع التجربة النضالية للأفارقة السود في نضالهم ضد العنصرية في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. وفي نهاية هذا تكلم عن كيف تجربتهم. أنا بالأمس أخذتهم على المقبرة الغربية وقصص الشهداء الفلسطينية، فكيف يتحول الفلسطيني ليس فقط ضحية ولكن شهيد في نضاله أو في نضالها للحرية والعدالة. فرحبوا واشكروا معي دكتور روبن. And now we have a presentation by Professor Rabab Abdulhadi. She will be talking about Teaching Palestine, the Spirit of 68, Pedagogical Praxis, and Indivisibility of Injustice. But yesterday we talked about that she would love to focus about her experience in fighting Zionist attempts to character assassination for her and to discredit her. But not only her, and all the voices fighting for justice and for including Palestine in the discourse, political discourse in the United States. فأهلا وسهلا في الدكتورة رباب. رح تتحدث الدكتورة رباب طبعا عن تجربتها في تدريس فلسطين، وأيضا تجربتها الأخيرة في محاولة الصهاينة لإسكات صوتها الحر والأصوات اللي منادية في تدريس فلسطين في الأكاديمية في الولايات المتحدة وحول العالم. فأهلا وسهلا بك دكتورة رباب.
صباح الخير. السلام عليكم. Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. I don't usually do PowerPoints, but I think it's good to show some pictures because a picture is worth 1,000 words. What do? I just do enter? هذا الكمبيوتر. Okay. لا no أنا ما. Okay. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to An-Najah National University, Dr. Maher, Dr. Saida, Mr. Khaled, Ms. Noor, Professor Said Abu Hijle, and I want to also thank members of the delegation that came with me, the 2018 Teaching Palestine, Pedagogical Praxis, and the Indivisibility of Justice. I also want to thank each and every person who has stood by us against Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian Zionist attacks that try to silence, intimidate, smear, bully, and police scholarship, pedagogy, and advocacy on justice for and Palestine. I have to thank my lawyers who are fighting and defending me pro bono, free of charge, compared with a law firm that is supporting the Zionists of almost 1,000 lawyers who are supporting them, and we still won. We still won because justice is on our side. And we had a very broad-based coalition. I'm going to rush through. These are the names of the people who are on the delegation. You will hear from them throughout the day. Amazing, amazing group of people. What we are going to do, we are going to put Teaching Palestine in praxis, enacting the indivisibility of justice by going throughout Palestine, from Yafa to Birzeit to Al-Quds to seeing the Apartheid wall. We visited the Samaritan community and the museum last night. We're going to be going to Nablus Old City, Trade Union Movement, General Union of Palestinian Women, and Naqab, Hebron, Bethlehem, Dheishe, Jerusalem Old City, the Aqsa Mosque, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Afro-Palestinian community. We're going to be going to Ramallah, El Bire, Haifa, Adala, Ain Hod, Akka, Nazareth, and we are going to end the last day on May 30th at the National Mobilization for the Day of the Land in the 48 areas. And this is what Teaching Palestine means. And this is why they're trying to silence us and they're trying to stop us from doing this. Why Teaching Palestine? We talked about the spirit of 68. I'm going to move through it. That led to the creation of the College of Ethnic Studies that my colleague, Professor Robin Kelley, discussed. That led to the creation to the Arab and Muslim Ethnicity and Diaspora Studies program, because we want to emphasize that knowledge production must be justice-centered. Otherwise, it would be irrelevant and will only produce injustice. It is our job to teach, to learn, to study, and to produce knowledge. If we are not producing knowledge for justice, to what ends do we produce knowledge? To teach students how to build missiles, nuclear missiles, and kill other people? To teach people hatred? No, we insist on teaching justice. And this is what we are trying to do. It's also very important to respond to current issues. And it's also very important to think in all sorts of spaces. How do we teach Palestine? How do we teach Palestine in the university? How to teach Palestine in the prison, as Dr. Samuel Kelani is going to talk, and he talked about last time during the prisoner delegation. How do we teach Palestine in the streets, in the coffee shops, in talking with family members, under curfew, at checkpoints, in prisons? Every single place there is possibilities of teaching and learning Palestine as part of the indivisibility of justice. This is the project. Why did we create this project this year? It's because this year was very important, 2017, 2018, very important year in the history of Palestine. 50th anniversary of the 67 occupation, 10th anniversary of the blockade of Gaza, 35th anniversary of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the Sabra and Shatila massacre, 100 years of the Balfour Declaration. We say 100 years of colonialism, 100 years of resistance, not only 100 years of colonialism. And we don't say mandate, because mandate is a sanitized term. This is part of Teaching Palestine. To label a colonial occupation. We talk about British colonial rule. We talk about, there is the 30th anniversary of the 1987 Intifada, the 70th anniversary of the UN partition of Palestine, the 70th anniversary of the Yassin massacre is coming up next month, the 70th anniversary of Nakba. How do we think about these anniversaries, and how do we think about them as possibilities to shift the discourse and knowledge production on what does it mean? The Zionist narrative and the settler colonial narrative in general, not just on Palestine, it always tells the story as a story of submission, subjugation, and defeat. Submission, subjugation, and defeat. And it is our jobs as people who are producing knowledge to tell a different story. A story of resistance, a story of steadfastness, and story of staying put, and insistence and resilience to live until people liberate themselves. And this is not untrue. This is reflected in reality. We just need to be able, as people who produce knowledge, all of us, students, faculty, scholars, people outside, every members of the community, to think about how do we produce knowledge and how do we challenge the ways in which colonial knowledge tells us certain things and certain ways to think about it. And one of the things, for instance, in Palestine, I was telling the delegation yesterday, in the West Bank, and I'm here from Nablus, very proud Nablus, very proud to be back home, is we refer to the settlements as mustawtanat. Palestinians in the 48 call them musta'marat. And shifting even the terminology from mustawtanat to musta'marat in itself is a resistance act that takes actually a lot of practice, a lot of scripting to think about how do we even change our own language and our own terminology. Do we talk about occupation or do we talk about colonial rule? How do we understand it? What is it that we do? And there is multiple ways of thinking about it. We're also doing this year because this is the 50th anniversary, not only the San Francisco State University's longest student strike in the history of the United States, and a few days ago was the 50th anniversary of the end of the strike that Professor Kelley talked about. It also comes to the anniversary of May 68, not only in France. People remember France, they think about Columbia University, but it was in Mexico, in Tunisia, in Senegal, in many other places around the world. We don't have time to get through them, but in July we're going to have an international symposium at the World Congress of Middle East Studies, WCMAS, in Seville, Spain, and that will be also another side of thinking about it. But to put things, World Congress of Middle East Studies, it's the largest conference of Middle East Studies that happens every 4 years, and this next year is going to be at in Seville, Spain. Last time was in Ankara, right during the war on Gaza, the Israeli attack on Gaza, and many scholars, including Professor Saad Obahijli, participated. But to bring things in context, right before we were coming on March 13th, Campus Watch, one of the main Zionist groups, put out a tweet, and I was trying, one of the reasons that we were trying to work in PR to see if we can capture the tweet itself and show it to you, but the internet hasn't been working throughout the time, so it is missing. But they put out something, and this is what they are saying. SFSU Professor Rabab Abdulhadi organized a March conference at 2 West Bank universities. They don't say Palestinians, they say West Bank because they don't want to acknowledge Palestine, that promote terrorism and hatred against Israel and Jews at BZ and An-Najah University. She also brokered the partnership between Najah and SFSU that Middle East Forum, it's part of Campus Watch, seeks to end. And I will talk a little bit more about that. Why? What is the target? The target is An-Najah and BZ. The target of Palestinian